Hello, everybody, and welcome to O2 Classroom. I'm Lisa, and I'm the producer of O2 Classroom and also the educational content developer here at First Class Medical. We're here every Tuesday to talk about things that will hopefully help you manage your respiratory condition better. And by manage your condition better, we mean preventing exacerbation, we mean slowing progression, we mean just making your day-to-day a little bit easier. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about something that somebody in our Facebook forum asked me about. We've covered this topic a few times before, but it is an important one, so we're going to go ahead and do it again. Somebody asked me in the forum, what is the best way for people with COPD or other lung ailments to deal with the air quality issues that we've been dealing with all this summer? I don't know where you live, but I feel like the western half of the country is on fire and the eastern half is underwater. So today we're going to talk about both those environmental concerns, how that could affect your lung condition, and what to do to make it better. The first thing, the name of the game for dealing with a natural disaster, whether it be a wildfire or a hurricane, a tornado, anything like that, is planning ahead. Now, with a hurricane, sometimes you have a little bit of advance warning. You know, they think it might make landfall, and there's a lot of weather reports. Sometimes a tornado comes out of nowhere. Here in Colorado, we've had a few tornadoes touch down. It's a clear blue sky. An hour later, it's getting cloudy. And then an hour after that, we're looking at tornado damage. So you don't always have a lot of time to plan and to get things together. So you want to do these things before, any of these things happen. And mostly you're planning, especially if you're somebody who's on oxygen, you want to plan for any kind of power outage. Now, power outage in the summer could be because of fires or things like that. Could be because the power grid got overdrawn because of air conditioning in the cities and things like that. So there's brownouts or blackouts. And a few years ago, when they were doing rolling blackouts in California because of the fires, and because so many people were trying to use their air conditioning and all that, there were a couple people that ended up dying because they were on portable oxygen concentrators and their power went out in the middle of the night and they didn't necessarily know when it was going out or, weren't able to get anywhere. So you don't want to get caught there. So we're going to talk about a few plans to go to, help that go better, hopefully. The first thing, if you feel like there is a possibility that you may need to evacuate, there's fires in your area or you hear a hurricane may be coming, the best case scenario is evacuate early. Even if you might not have to evacuate, if you have somebody that you can stay with outside the area, that's the best case scenario. Not everybody has that option. So if you don't have that option, contact whoever's assisting with the evacuations. Oftentimes that's the Red Cross. Let them know that you're an oxygen user or you have COPD or you have certain special mobility needs or whatever, and that if in fact there is an evacuation, you might need some additional help and able to evacuate. And call your power company and let them know. Sometimes power goes out, of its own accord if there's a hurricane or whatever. Sometimes they shut off the power if there's a fire so that lines don't snap and cause more problems. So if that happens, or if you feel like it may happen, call also your power company and let them know you're dependent on that electricity for your oxygen equipment, and they need, so that hopefully they can prioritize your power coming back on, but they can also give you a heads up if they think, tomorrow we're looking at possibly having to do this. They can, they can, let you know so that you have time to get somewhere else. If you are somewhere and the power does go out, keep in mind that places like hospitals, fire stations, things like that likely have an emergency generator. So if you can't get out of the area and somewhere, at least get to one of those places, because you'll be able to plug your oxygen equipment in there. Let them know you're coming. And before, plan your evacuation route. A lot of times, sometimes if there's a fire too, there's only one way in and one way out. So you're going to keep in mind that everybody's on that road. So you might be sitting in traffic for quite some time. So gas your car up. Make sure that you have a go bag. If you're on oxygen and you have a concentrator, make sure you've got your DC power supply in the car so that you can plug that concentrator in and you don't have to worry about running out of batteries sitting in traffic, because you can run it from your DC power supply. Make sure that you have more than one route planned if possible. Again, evacuate early. Make sure you have a go bag ready with your prescription, your medications, extra tubing, your cleaning equipment. I mean, everything like that. We have we made a list for you. It's kind of a checklist that you can go through and you can download it. Anytime you hear me talking about a download on this show, where you'll find any of those downloads, flyers, pamphlets, whatever they may be, are going to be in our private Facebook group. I'll put the link in here as soon as I get done. If you haven't joined the private Facebook group, there's more than 5,000 respiratory patients like yourself who are living with lung disease every single day. It's a fun group as far as you'll learn a lot in there. You can ask questions, you can share knowledge. I've never seen a question go unanswered in there. Somebody says, my doctor wants me to do this certain thing, or they're wanting me to move on to this medication. Has anybody had an experience with that? And most of all, there's a lot of characters in there and they're sharing a good laugh and supporting one another. It's so important. So anyway, when you go into the private support group, if you go up to the top, you'll see a drop-down menu that says more. You click on more, you'll see something that says files. Click on files, you'll see any of these sheets that I've talked about. Even if you're watching a show from a year ago, I leave the files in there so you'll be able to find them. The only thing I take out is if it's a coupon or something that, expires, but any of the recipe sheets that we have, any of the download sheets that we have, any of the informational stuff we have, I leave in there so you can see it, no matter when you're watching this show. If you want to watch any shows from before, you'll see either myself or Corey, who's one of the owners here, talking about any number of topics. If you go to the First Class Medical Facebook page, click on video, click on more again up at the top, the drop down menu, you'll see videos, click on videos. We've probably got 100 videos in there now. So anyway, download your checklist, make sure you've got everything on there, make a dedicated place for it so that you don't have to run around looking for it. And then a couple other things to keep in mind. If your power goes out, it also means your AC is going to go out. So if we've talked a lot on the show about how indoor humidity as well as, outside humidity can affect your breathing. More moisture in the air means it just, less oxygen and it makes it harder to breathe. So keep in mind that even if you're not on oxygen and you may lose power, you're going to lose your AC, which is going to kick that humidity up. And if you're somebody who's very sensitive to that, keep in mind you might have to go somewhere else if that happens. A couple of things you might want to speak to your doctor about if there's if you feel like this might be a concern in your area. Ask them for some extra, if you can keep maybe 2 weeks worth of inhalers on hand, or whatever medication you have. Ask them if you can get a little extra. They don't like to give out extra because A, they want to make sure you're using it as directed, and B, sometimes, people get nervous about things, like when COVID started and people start hoarding things, and there's not enough for everybody. So they're sort of reluctant to sort of give out extras. However, they'll be willing to give you 2 weeks if you just say, look, I'm worried, hurricane season's starting, or, I heard this might happen. I'm sure they'll be, happy to give you an extra dose. And ask them if you should be still using your peak flow meter to measure, your lung function, or if there's other, stair steps that you should be looking for. And ask them if you usually take your medication in a nebulizer, ask if you could maybe get a meter dose inhaler too. So in case you can't use your nebulizer, you'll still be able to, get that medication out of a meter dose inhaler, just for emergencies. And ask them if you are on oxygen, if you can increase, if the weather starts getting, or the air quality starts getting bad and your breathing starts getting hard, if you can increase your oxygen flow. Generally speaking, we advise against that, because oxygen it's just like any medication. You're prescribed a certain rate, and until you talk to your doctor or until you talk to your respiratory therapist and get another rate, or they tell you to adjust it, you shouldn't be adjusting it on your own. But ask them, okay, if the air gets bad, can I raise my oxygen rate? And if so, what is the maximum I should raise it to? And for how long? If you start to feel better within 30 minutes, then it's okay. If you don't feel better after 30 minutes, then should you go to the hospital? Ask them what to do, just so you know. And in certain cases, if you live somewhere that's sort of far away, or if you have transportation issues or something like that, ask them if maybe you should be admitted into a facility, just as a precautionary measure, either into a care facility temporarily, or a hospital or something like that, just for precautionary measures. If you're worried that you won't be able to evacuate as quickly. And we've gone over this before. I just want to mention it again because we do, this happens all the time at work. Your concentrator, you want to make sure you're storing it properly. And by properly, I mean it should be in a climate controlled area, not out in the garage, not in the trunk of the car, not, somewhere, in a shed or something like that. Make sure that you keep it somewhere it's climate controlled. First of all, it's like any electronics, extreme temperatures, whether it's heat or cold, are bad for electronics. And the way that your concentrator works is it draws in ambient air and it's filtered out through a medical sieve. I don't know if you've ever seen sieve before. You can look it up, online, and there's, pictures on there in the microscope. It basically looks like a very fine sand, and molecules of nitrogen and other gases that are in the air are larger than the oxygen molecules. So they get trapped there in the sieve and then expelled. And the oxygen molecules, because they're smaller, they pass through the sieve and they go through. But I'm sure you've seen sand that's either sat for a long time and it gets compacted down, or it's gotten wet and it gets clumpy. If that happens, it's not filtering correctly. So if you don't want to leave it out where it's going to get wet in there, humid or things like that, and you don't want to leave it sitting somewhere where it's just compact down. A lot of people like to use their concentrator just while traveling, and if you want to do that, that's totally fine. But just make sure that once a month you're taking that concentrator out, or twice a month, and running it for a couple hours. The best thing to do is to run it until the battery's dead. Once the battery's dead, charge it back up to full, and then put it back in the closet or wherever you're keeping it. Don't ever leave the batteries stored too long on completely dead, because they're not going to be able to hold a charge after that. If you leave your car battery dead for too long, if it just goes dead, you might be able to get a jump and get it going. But if you leave it sitting dead for too long, it's not going to start. Same principle here. So make sure you store it properly. Please don't wait until you need it to realize that your batteries are no longer holding a charge. That's why we say, run it every couple months, because, we've had plenty of calls of people going on vacation who just try to, charge their batteries up the night before, and they're not holding a charge very well. So we've got to overnight them batteries. It's panicky for them. It's panicky for us. So just, test it out. Make sure that it's working. Consider getting an external charger, especially if you travel a lot. You can charge your battery while you're in the hotel, and you don't have to carry that battery or, carry it around. You can go back and get the other one. But if you have to evacuate, there's only so many outlets in where, if you go to a shelter or something like that. You go to a gymnasium. I mean, how many outlets are there? Everybody's trying to charge their phone and things like that. So you don't want to have to sit next to that outlet the whole time while you're using your machine. So if you have an external charger, you can go further away, plug your external charger in, ask the people at the Red Cross desk or area if you can plug it in over there. And that way you can have your, you can still be somewhat mobile and move around a little bit, and your battery can be charging. So consider getting that. Make sure you got your AC DC power cords, like we said, and your insurance information, as well as your prescriptions. Okay, so now after the disaster, after the hurricane, after the fire, you want to make sure that don't go back to your home. I know it's stressful because you don't know you don't know what happened, how much damage. It's so stressful and scary. Completely understandable. But make sure that you don't go back until they tell you it's safe to go back. First of all, they've checked the structure to make sure it's still sound. But especially for respiratory patients, if it has gotten wet in there, you don't want to go back until you can have somebody go in there and, clean up the water, make sure that there's no mold growing in there. Mold is one of the most dangerous things for respiratory patients. For allergies, can cause an exacerbation and can cause, illness. And as we know, if you have a serious exacerbation and you have lung damage, that lung damage is not repairable. So we want to just prevent that from happening. So, especially if you have drywall, during Katrina, they talked a lot about A lot of the houses in New Orleans were affected badly because they were drywall. And even though there was maybe, 6 inches of water in the bottom, the drywall drew the water all the way up to the top, and just, all those walls had to come down. And, just absorb that water. So humid in Louisiana too. So just make sure that somebody else hopefully can go check and make sure, check for mold and make sure it's safe for you to go back up there. Okay, so that's hurricanes. We talked a little bit about fires. The person that was actually in the Facebook group was actually asking me about some of the poor air quality we've experienced here in the West. On my phone, I have an air quality checker. It just comes with my iPhone. It's on my weather app, and it tells me the air quality. Today, our air quality is pretty good. It says 80. 80 is, I guess, moderate, but it's good compared to what we have had. But for about 2 weeks straight, because of the fire, we didn't have any fires here in Colorado, but there's fires in the Northwest. And the wind is sort of where the way it was blowing was just sort of blowing it up across our state. And so we couldn't see the mountains, couldn't see the skyline. It was very hazy for a couple weeks. And when I checked that air quality index, we had some that were probably like maybe up in the 130 area, which is high. Air quality, the index goes from 0 to 500. That's a standardized thing the government uses. 0 to 50 is good. 51 to 100 is moderate. 101 to 150 is unhealthy for sensitive groups. So we were unhealthy for sensitive groups for quite some time, a couple weeks. And 151 to 200 is unhealthy for everybody. If you're over 200, it's probably a fire is going on, or there's been some sort of industrial disaster or something like that, and everybody's sort of evacuated. So, that's you need to get out of the area if you see that. But likely, you've been ordered to evacuate by that time. But we had unhealthy for sensitive groups, and that is for those who have lung ailments. So smoke, even though it looks wispy, is actually considered a particle pollution. So you want to make sure that you're using a mask, such as an N95, to, if you have to go outside, to filter out those particles. I predict that because wildfires in the summertime have been sort of become our new normal, unfortunately. And scientists predict that over the next few years, droughts may become more prolonged, so we may see more fires. That filtration is going to go through a lot of changes here in the U.S. I have a friend that actually works at the Denver Art Museum, and he said that when COVID started, they redid a lot of their air filtration in there. Because they were basically just trying to stay open. They were just trying to make sure their employees could stay healthy, make sure that guests were safe. And they just wanted to stay open. They didn't want, they don't want people getting sick in there and stuff like that. So they really upgraded their filtration system in there. So I'm assuming in a lot of public spaces like museums and things like that, and even apartment buildings and stuff like that, they're probably going to be, a lot of changes in filtration. So what does that mean for your home? Well, for right now, we've got a few tools that we can use that we've talked about before. But so in your furnace, in your air conditioner, there are filters that you can use. Filters are rated by how much they filter out. So if your furnace or AC can take a HEPA filter. HEPA filter is HEPA, and that stands for high efficiency particle absorption. That will not only filter out, microbes, things that are going to make you sick, but it's also going to filter out, some of the things in the air, such as smoke, particulates, things like that. So if there is a fire in your area and the air is poor for whatever reason, make sure that you're using your air conditioner, if you have it, on the recirculation feature, not drawing air from outside that has to keep going through that filter. You're much better, recirculating the air. You can, if your insulation isn't good, or if your doors and windows are sort of drafty, you can put some wet towels there, some damp towels there to sort of stop that smoke from coming in. Just make sure that it's not too damp and you're not, creating mold, but some damp towels would be good. You can also consider getting a air cleaner. We talked about air cleaners before. One of the things when you're looking at the air quality index you want to look at is the ozone in the air. Ozone is very irritating to lung tissue. So if you, for everyone, but especially for those with a lung condition. So if you have a lung condition and you see that the ozone rate is high, you may want to stay in that day, or at least you may want to wear a mask. But so some of the air filters, the best ones for your use for those with lung conditions are the ones that have, as we said, HEPA filters in them. There's some air cleaners that came out, a few years ago that use electrostatic plates. They more use like electrostatic energy to filter out the air versus using like the cottony filters that we're used to seeing. And people like those because they don't have to change the filter. However, those aren't good for people who have, the American Lung Association has said this, those are not good for lung patients because they do create a very small amount of ozone. And even though if you have healthy lungs that, may not bother you, for those with, lung problems, it will likely bother you. If you're going to get a clean air filter, there's a couple things you can do. If your house is sort of an open floor plan, you can make a clean room. So if the air is bad outside and there's somewhere where you can close yourself in, whether it's a bedroom or something like that, you can sort of make that your clean room. Make sure you keep the door closed. You can put a towel under the door so no air is coming in. You use your air filter in there. My house is pretty little, so I could probably get an air filter that, cleans the whole house, and I can just sort of move about if I, close all my windows and stuff like that. Air filters are rated what they call the CADR system, CADR. And CADR stands for Clean Air Delivery Rate. So you want to, if your house is 1,000 square feet, maybe get one that is rated, the CADR rating is for like 1,200 or, a little bit larger than what space you're trying to clean. Because first of all, it might be a little bit quieter, so you don't have to run it on the, very highest setting or use a little bit less like electricity, things like that, and it just may be more effective. Make sure that you're cleaning the filters and doing the maintenance like you're supposed to so that it's running properly. And when you are going to buy an air cleaning system, make sure that you look and see how much the filters are. Sometimes the air filter, they put the machine down the lower end of cost, but the filters are real expensive. So make sure you understand like what the cost is going to be as we go through. Okay. So that is dealing with, air pollution. The World Health Organization estimates that up to 4 million people per year die globally, having something to do with something in the air, whether it's an industrial disaster, whether it's wildfires, whether it's prolonged pollution exposure or things like that. So it's important that you can control some of the air within your home with some of these filtration devices. And also not adding more pollution, making sure that your ventilation system when you're cooking is working properly, or that somewhere that you can at least open a window and, let smoke out, let steam out. Steam is humidity. So, if you're boiling something on the stove and you're adding humidity into the air, it's going to make you, it's going to make it a little bit harder to breathe. So especially because meal prep can be exhausting. That's one of the things that COPD patients have listed most often as something that is just very tiring for them. And that is, food prep. So, make sure that if you're, you're boiling something on the stove and you're, preparing something else, try to make it, if you have a countertop that's a little bit further away from the stove, first of all, you're not going to be so hot, but it's also, you're not going to be breathing that steam. Turn on the fan if you have it, or at least open a window if you don't, and make sure you're not adding that pollution in. Another thing that's very dangerous that a lot of people die of every year is indoor pollution from radon. Radon comes from fissures in the ground, and they can get into your house, via cracks in the foundation. Here in Colorado, we are like our soil and our ground contains a lot of what is known as bentonite. And bentonite is a very kind of volatile stone. It cracks and breaks. If you drive around any neighborhood in Colorado, you're likely to see, cracks in the driveways. And, we have some foundation problems because of the bentonite. So a lot of times, places, the health departments in your city and state will give out free radon kits. Here in Colorado, I think we get free ones, but I think we only get them in January. I'm not 100% sure. January is Radon Safety Awareness Month, when they want everybody to check their radon. So, if you want to get a radon kit, you can get them at any hardware store. They're like less than $20. And the instructions are in there, but you basically, you leave out the kit, and they tell you not to put it right in the basement because they want to know what the air quality is throughout your home. But I work in the basement, so I actually did mine in the basement. So, but basically you just, leave it out for the exposure, and you send it in and they test it for you and they let you know. Usually it just takes a week or so for the results to come back. But you may be able to get a free kit from your health department in your state. So just double check. Anyway, okay. So make sure, plan ahead, download the list so you have your go bag. Make sure that you've spoken to your doctor about any precautions that they want you to do. If this happens, then do this. Make sure that you know exactly where all your stuff is. You don't want to be running around looking for it as people are trying to tell you to evacuate. Evacuate early if you can. And okay, Michelle, thank you. Thanks, Michelle, for watching. And I will see you here again next week. Take care of yourself. Bye.